So I'm not going to show you a game, but I've got some really sexy formulae and mathematical models for you, okay? And as Rick said, I'm very sorry that Chrissy can't be here because she's been really absolutely instrumental in our work package, in coordinating and giving input, and many other people, and I'll thank them at the end of my presentation. So I'm going to quickly look at the key questions that we've been grappling with in our work package, and then look at the methods reviews that we've done, the case studies, and that really lovely software package, ADIS, and then briefly talk a little bit about guidance and best practice recommendations. So this is the framework that we've developed in our work package, which is very much related to what you heard before. So the questions that you see in the first column sort of move from efficacy and safety to relative efficacy and relative safety, all under study conditions, to relative effectiveness in study populations, which takes into account who will get the drug, and then all the way to relative effectiveness and relative safety in predicted real-world populations. And the methods that we used and that we looked at in our work package in great detail was really network meta-analysis, individual patient data network meta-analysis and meta-regression, and mathematical modeling when we were moving to real-world conditions. So let's look at these methods reviews and case studies and the ADIS tool briefly. We did 3 methodological reviews, which are review articles that really look at methodological, statistical, in this case, literature, on network meta-analysis, IPD meta-analysis and IPD network meta-analysis, and mathematical modeling to predict real-world effectiveness, to bridge the gap between efficacy and effectiveness. And we really were wondering what has been done before, what are at this stage, the state-of-the-art methods in these 3 research areas, and summarize the challenges and obviously also develop methods to take this forward. So the case studies related to depression in Utrecht, and the focus was to explore methods for the network meta-analysis of IPD data. The schizophrenia case studies, which was done in Greece, in Ioannina, extended methods for a joint network meta-analysis which included both RCT data and observational data. And then the case study that we did in Bern was about rheumatoid arthritis, and we explored the mathematical modeling to predict real-world effectiveness using RCT and observational data. And I'll get back to these case studies in a moment. So this is our claim to not gaming, but to something that is also a bit of fun, which is the ADIS Aggregate Data Drug Information System, which is a very user-friendly software package which has a study-oriented repository of summary level trial data. As the name says, this is not about IPD, this is about aggregate data, and which does state-of-the-art evidence synthesis, network meta-analysis and network meta-regression, and then in addition has a module that does decision analysis. And one of the strengths of this package is that it's all programmed in R, so it's all open source and fully accessible and transparent what's going on behind this very nice and user-friendly surface. So, as I said, it does these things, and what perhaps I should highlight is that it can deal with the inclusion of observational real-world data, and it can give these data more or less weight in the analyses. It's got a web-based user interface, and as I said, it's all based on R. And in the publications, there's additional code that is relevant in this context. So you can actually use this today during the lunch break, and Gert is sitting there and looking forward to seeing you at his stand, and I'm sure you'll be impressed. So let's look briefly at these methods review in a bit greater detail. So the review that was done by Orestes from Ionina, he's now in Bern, of the methodology of network meta-analysis is published. All these 3 reviews are published in Research Synthesis Methods this year. And this is really a discussion of network meta-analysis, and of course the authors are some of the real, leading experts on that topic. They address issues like, how can we account for the risk of bias in a network meta-analysis? How can we take into account that some studies will have produced more or less reliable estimates? How can we deal with multiple outcomes, repeated measures? How should we define the number of nodes in a network, etc.? And there's also a review of software tools for fitting a network meta-analysis in addition to the software package I just mentioned. Then Thomas de Braai in Utrecht and colleagues did a review of IPD meta-analysis, and again looked at topical issues like investigating heterogeneity, combining IPD and published aggregate data, including evidence from non-randomized studies, etc. And then we in Bern looked at mathematical modeling to bridge the efficacy effectiveness gap, and we interestingly found only very few studies that attempted to do this, and we then subsequently in our case study really developed our own approach. This is also published in that journal. So if we look at a few recommendations that came out of this work, and again during the lunch break you can talk to the experts who've been working on these topics. Recommendations on network meta-analysis including IPD from RCTs. So you should typically start with a 2-stage network meta-analysis. Look at modeling so that you avoid heterogeneity and network inconsistency, and of course pre-specify these design choices in your protocol. Do sensitivity analyses to understand the impact of these assumptions, and there's also a discussion on when to include IPD and how to prioritize different sources of evidence in a given network meta-analysis. Network meta-analysis including real-world evidence. This is a really interesting model which allows you to give real-world evidence more or less weight in a network, and you can also, You can also analyze RCT and non-randomized evidence separately. In fact, this is recommended as a start, but then you can see what happens if you give real-world evidence more or less weight in your network. So in this case, blue is randomized evidence and red is real-world evidence. You can visualize the contribution of different sources of evidence in this way. And then the predictive modeling that we worked on in Bern, particularly Eva didn't. And again, this is a paper which is about to be circulated. You'll get that all probably today or tomorrow. And the lessons or recommendations here are that you need to model first the process of who's getting what treatment in order to understand who will get the treatment you're interested in modeling its effectiveness in the real world. And a lot of emphasis in that paper is given on internal validation and sensitivity analyses. So with that, I'll close, and I just want to thank again everyone who's been involved in this work. Gert, Dan and his group in Groningen, who, as I said, will be presenting the ADIS software package in a few minutes. And then in Utrecht, Thomas, Hans and Carl Moons, and in Ionina, Georgia Salanti and Orestis Eftiamou, and in Bern, Noemi, Eva and Jan, and without them this would not have been possible. And again, I thank Chrissy Fletcher from Amgen, who's been my industry partner and absolutely brilliant in moving this agenda forward. Thank you.